Hello and a warm welcome to this evening's Journal Talks. The Kerala Museum is a vibrant beacon of the arts in Kochi. Set up in 1987, it was the dream of R. Madhavan Nair, who even then recognized the need for a cultural institution that would influence learning in history and fine arts in the city. In 2022, to mark its 35th year in existence, the museum embarked on a program to create the Journal Digital Archives, a collection of photo essays, digital exhibitions, and talks by drawing on microhistories of people and communities from Kerala. Journal Talks is part of the public programming around the Journal project and is supported by the Geojit Foundation. Today, we are happy and privileged to have with us author and historian Dr. Sebastian Joseph. Dr. Sebastian Joseph is a film historian specializing in historical cinema, Malayalam stardom, and film archaeology. A Kerala State Film Award-winning scholar, 2020, he brings a strong background in film history, environmental history, and transdisciplinary research. He's currently head of Environmental History and Anthropocene Studies, TIES, Kottayam, academic coordinator, Kerala History Congress, and visiting faculty at St. Mary's College, Manarkod. He also consults on the Journal project. His lecture today is titled Sree Narayana Guru's Scientific Imagination of the Social. I'll give you a brief introduction of the talk before we begin. Sree Narayana Guru may be understood as a profoundly scientific thinker of social life in Kerala at a time when social reality itself was discursively manufactured through the ritual imagination and epistemic authority of the savarna elite. Through a methodical skepticism towards inherited hierarchies and a rational interrogation of scriptural and customary knowledge systems, he articulated a social scientific mode of thought that was at once ethical, empirical in orientation, and decisively liberatory in intent. By deploying what may be termed a cunning of reason, subtly resignifying religious idiom while unsettling its orthodox foundations, he did not merely construct a counter-narrative, but inaugurated an alternative grammar of social being grounded in equality, reflexivity, and emancipatory reconstruction. Before the lecture, a few house rules. Attendees, please keep your phones on silent for the duration of the lecture so that the speaker is audible. As you all know, we are going to be live on YouTube and recording, so please make sure that your speakers and phones are off. The lecture is for 45 minutes, followed by a Q&A, where we'll take a maximum of 5 questions. Everyone has their own beliefs and perspectives, and let's make an effort to respect others while we share our own views. And now, Dr. Sebastian Joseph, warmly welcome you to the podium.
Thank you very much for your generous introduction, Aditi Sakriya, Director of Kerala Museum. I consider Kerala Museum as a university because the lectures and the kind of academic programs that they're engaged in point to the fact that, museum is sometimes the best university. So friends and fellow men, today I am doing a paper or a lecture on Sree Narayana Guru on his scientific imagination of the social. The title needs some justification. And before going into the details or the core arguments of the talk, I would like to give you a brief chronological kind of evolution of Sree Narayana Guru. Because Sree Narayana Guru, right from his birth in the year 1856 to 1928, the year of his death, he was growing all the way. It was a kind of evolution, and that evolution can be considered as an intellectual evolution well grounded in critical scientific thinking. So if we look at the chronological type of ordering or sequential growth of Guru, you can see that the transition was from a spiritual sector, his activities in the spiritual sector, to kind of symbolic reforms that he was engaged in, like the installations and different kinds of installations that he engaged with, and later to an institutional builder. And finally, we will be arriving at the most important part of his growth, evolution, that is a universal humanist and a public intellectual. We are standing at a very perilous, times, critical times, as far as the nation is concerned, when cultural authenticity is sometimes considered as truth, while homogenization is considered to be a positive aspect of the present contemporary times, making salads rather than living in a rainforest like that. So Guru was a person who chose to live in the rainforest, not in the green salad. You know that there is a vital difference between a green salad and a rainforest. A green salad contains certain fruits or cut vegetables, as well as it marginalizes certain other fruits or vegetables. But rainforest is not like that. It is a holistic entity where all diverse plural elements and living beings and as well as non-living beings coexist in the rainforest. So from 1856 onwards, some people consider Guru's birth in the year 1855, some as 1857. Anyway, the generally accepted historical understanding is that he was born on 20th August 1856 at Chembandi. Then if you look at the 1870s, after 14 years of his birth, it was a kind of intellectual mentoring under various gurus, interactions with people, a kind of itinerant philosophical journey. He was moving from place to place, meeting different people, as well as doing certain meditations or something like asceticism practiced in Kerala as well as in Tamil Nadu. From 1884 to 1887, this period is considered as the making of Guru as a thinker. Some kind of a structural transformation happened in the mindset of Guru. A period of intense meditation and wandering. He was moving like a wanderer. At the same time, he was intensely meditating on certain issues. In 1888 comes one of the most important event in Guru's life. You know about the consecration of the idol at Arivipuram, 1888, which is variously interpreted as the idol of Shiva, or in the words of Guru, to some scholars, it is Guru's Shiva or Nammuda Shiva, as he said. We are not sure about what was the conversation that happened between the Brahminic priestly classes and Guru. But anyway, he said that this Shiva belongs to us, or this God belongs to us. After coming up from the Naya river, from deep cold waters, he consecrated that stone as Shiva or God that was convenient for him to explain. And from 1893 to 1898, 5 years, you can see that at various places he installed and consecrated temples. And even a mirror was installed at Kalamakoda near Alleppey, just to explicate that when you look at the mirror, you are seeing yourself. That means God resides within yourself. In 1903 was the formation or establishment of the SNDP, Sree Narayana Dharma Paripalana Yoga, with Dr. Palpu. And in 1904, he founded the Shivagiri Mutt at Varkala. And in 1905, I don't know, perhaps some of you may know that he was instrumental in organizing the first All India Industrial Agricultural Exhibition at Kollam. From 1905 to 1915, he totally moved from temple consecrations and installations to educational reforms, and he opined during this time that we need to encourage students to take up the world of letters, especially English education. In 1912, he established the Sharada Temple, which is actually a temple for knowledge at Varkala. In 1913 to 1918, he was engaged in some serious compositions, including Daiva Dashakam, wrote philosophical works, Atmavadesha Shatakam and Daiva Shatakam. And in 1921 to 24, he was seen actively promoting and supporting progressive movements in Travancore as well as Cochin, including the Vaikam Satyagraha, and convened very near to this place the All Religions Conference at Alua. And in 1925 to 1928, he was seen actively engaged in counseling and giving guidance to his disciples, students, teaching and writing, 100% writing. And on 20th September 1928, he died. And meanwhile, I forgot that in 1922, he was instrumental even in establishing the Travancore Labor Association. Travancore Labor Association. He was instrumental in associating with Travancore Labor Association and said that, now the age that is going to come is the age of the workers. So if you look at this particular chronological sequential ordering of Guru, you'll be able to understand that he was evolving all the way from a boy who was born in Chempadandi, a rural rustic, setup, to that of an internationally acclaimed philosopher. So here, deviating from the usual pattern of looking at Guru as the father of modern Kerala Renaissance, or as a philosophical thinker, or various perspectives, unleashed by historians, sociologists, and thinkers, I wish to look at Guru from a very different point of view. And the angularity of my thought stems from a very recent historiographical, that means science of history has changed much, and now we have a stream called emotional history. 97 years and 5 months and 7 days have passed since his death on 20th September 1928. Even now his ideas and life continues to shape Kerala's social and moral imagination. So that is the hold of this philosopher, the hold of the reformer, the hold of the thinker. And under what conditions he was actually made into this kind of a thinker is a major point that we need to discuss. Mainly, the 19th century of Kerala, if you look at the 19th century of Kerala, it is crystal clear that a majority of the people in Kerala will living under the emotion of fear. This is one aspect that is generally neglected by historians so far. The Pulayas, the Parayas, the Idavas, all subordinate classes were living under the emotional regime of fear. And fear, it was not just, a biological kind of reflexivity, but it was actually a social product regulated and experienced within particular historical context. This is my first argument. Fear is socially produced regulated, and experienced within particular historical context. Some people, they were subjected to this tyranny of fear. And in history, there are various works that deal with cultural history of fear, like one of the historians, she's presently in London. I had an opportunity to talk to her in London while I was in London. She's an expert in the cultural history of fear. So she argues that fear must be understood culturally and historically as a response organized through language, memory, institutions, and social norms rather than as an instinctive reaction. This perspective of Joanna Bourse, actually she wrote this work, something related to the fear of the Britons during the Second World War. They were actually all of them living under the fear of death in the Second World War. So she phrased it out as the national emotion, that is fear of the Britons. So if we look from the angle, the perspective and lens of Joanna Bourse, these are serious implications for understanding Kerala history in the 19th century, because fear was experienced by oppressed communities, such as the untouchable classes in the 19th century Kerala, where fear was not simply an emotional reaction, but a lived, embodied condition produced by social structures of caste. Fear was not simply emotional reaction, but a lived, embodied condition produced by social structures of caste. When we look at some of the images, some of the photographic evidences or paintings of the period, it's easily digestible to us that, the particular emotion of fear was on the faces of these people, especially the subordinate, that is the marginalized classes. And here, Joanna Bourse's framework situates fear as a socially mediated emotion, embedded in discourse and practice. She demonstrates how political authorities and cultural elites actively construct fears of strangers, fears of others, fears of disease, fears of rebellion, and fears of moral contamination to discipline the population. So articulation and organized forms of fear is the result of these repressive regimes, disciplining the bodies, even emotions of the people who are subjected to this emotion of fear. My angularity of thought is predicated over the creation of Guru's mindset within this particular context, how Guru was able to respond to this, while many others were not responding, they were not challenging the particular situation in Kerala. Guru being a person from the marginalized class. Of course, there are certain individuals who resisted, who performed their kind of activities challenging the particular social order, but Guru was different from that, because Guru was actually looking at the ways in which this particular disorder is to be addressed ideologically. And Guru's sensibility was something very much connected to the creation of ideas. Maybe, I would like to phrase it out as ideational fertility of Sree Narayana Guru. He was making ideas. He was positing arguments. He was challenging the order based on the intellectual rigor, which he galvanized through understanding of the scriptures. All kinds of knowledge that was available for him, which was very scientific, like René Descartes' methodical doubt. And there is another historian and anthropologist named William M. Reddy, again a European, who advocates about a notion of emotional regimes referring to socially imposed norms that regulate which emotions are encouraged, feared, or suppressed within a society. This has also much bearing for the Kerala society in the 19th century. In caste society, such emotional regimes were manifested in practices that taught lower castes to internalize fear. So fear as a culture, as a cultural product, is to be internalized by the people. While they are afraid of pollution, they are afraid of bodily contact, while they are afraid of even visibility and fear about social interaction, things like that, it has to become very normal with them that they should feel that they are not slaves, they are not subjected to fear, but they are people who are having freedom in the Kerala society. So in this particular work of the navigation of feeling, a framework for the history of emotions, historian and anthropologist William R. Reddy aligns with earlier contributions of other historians who introduced the notion of emotional regimes, referring to socially imposed norms that regulate which emotions are encouraged, feared, or suppressed within a society. And the 19th century Kerala, the structures of untouchability, unapproachability, unseeability, and even unshadowability. You cannot even have a shadow. Created a pervasive affective environment that disciplined the subordinate bodies. So to discipline the subordinate bodies, the marginalist bodies, this emotion is to be cultivated, this emotion is to be promoted, this emotion is to be ritualized to greater extent. Here, as great French philosopher and theoretician Pierre Bourdieu argued, in this way, the untouchable communities were subjected to a habitus. A habitus means, a particular mental terrain within which they are made to think like that. That means we are subjected people, the habitus. They were subjected to spatial segregation, all unapproachability, untouchability, unseeability, and unshadowability norms, and everyday rituals of avoidance that taught them to anticipate threat and humiliation. These practices were not external impositions alone. They became internalized dispositions. That's why he said, fear was actually internalized in their minds, which created a habitus. Habitus means a mental terrain within which they lived that shaped the bodily conduct and emotional life. The habitus of the common, the poor people. In some sense, if you go by the spatial governance theory of Michel Foucault, another French philosopher, actually, the upper social classes, especially the Brahminical order, was creating they were engaging in a kind of cartography. That means creating a special landscape, marginalized landscape for the subordinate classes. So, actually, Guru was actually looking at this particular way of map making or cartography of the elite as excluding certain people from certain spaces, nullifying their presence, making them invisible. So Guru was, in that sense, Guru should be considered as a person who was engaging in a most creative kind of social cartography, a remapping of Kerala. So taken together, these theoretical approaches, perhaps, it's not that easy for us to understand all these theoretical, propositions within a short time. But why he said this is to relocate Guru from a very different context. Because actually the state of Travancore and Cochin states were actually put under this emotional regime produced by caste formations, ritual authority, and social norms. The untouchable classes did not merely experience fear, they lived it as a structuring principle that shaped spatial movement, bodily comportment. Comportment means even the gestures, the attire, and the appearances were decided by the upper classes of the society. And all social hopes and dreams were actually managed and manipulated by the upper sections of the society. That's why I said it's an emotional regime. And what was the result of this? So the untouchable classes did not merely experience fear. It was not a question of experiencing fear. They lived it as a structuring principle that shaped the spatial movement, bodily comportment, and social hopes. So thus the emotional history of fear thus helps us to understand how domination operates not only through legal and economic force, means regulations or laws, but through affective shaping of consciousness itself. A lesson that remains pertinent for studies of caste, colonialism, and modernity. So shaping consciousness, understanding what was a consciousness that was prohibiting these people from openly coming out and challenging the caste order, the social order, was a question that vexed Sree Narayana Guru. So what was the result of all this particular making of the fear, the emotional regime, and the kind of fear cartography that they were engaging in was that the society became a society, as in the words of great German existential philosopher Martin Heidegger, became a society, unthinking society, a society which cannot think. If you look at the present society, the 21st century society, it's something like an unthinking society. We are not able to think. Creative thinking is lost, ideas are not generated, instead ideas are replicated, duplicated, and celebrated as their own ideas. It's very easy for them to think because machines are thinking for them, which I call as gadgetization of the human. In those times, the people, the people that is locust people they were actually behaving something like the gadgets operated, like the robots of these days. The gadgets which were actually fixed in time and space, and they were operating like that. So Guru understood that the major problem with the lower strata people is that they are not thinking, they are not generating ideas to combat, to confront, to challenge the established norms of the society, exploitative order of the society. So that is why they were subjected like the mentality of the 100. There were actually 100 people like that. So Guru's time, caste was the great structure that limited human thought and freedom. They cannot think, so naturally if they don't think, that means they have no freedom to act. At this point of time emerges Guru. If I say that, Guru emerged at the intersection of pre-modern and modern thought processes in Kerala, it cannot be the right thing, because Guru was a person who was actually using the traditional knowledge system also to fight the traditional knowledge system, using the tradition to fight the tradition itself. So he cannot be considered as truly as an advocate of modernity, but he was a champion of modernity standing within the terrain, the domain of all traditional cultural elements in Kerala. So this Guru emerges as a social thinker. We know about the kind of contemplation that he was having in the Marithuamala, which is actually a hillock, a hilly region in somewhere near Kanyakumari, en route from Nagarkoil to Kanyakumari. So the contemplation was very necessary for him to get away from all the noises, all the crowd and all kind of, arguments that were happening, to be away and to think for him. Something like, people were living something in Plato's cave in those times. Plato in the Republic talks about the allegory of the cave. You are put and subjected to the tyrannical thinking as if in a cave. So the cavishness in thinking was very important for some time, to be away from all forms of knowledge that are currently in circulation, to be away from that and to think and meditate over the fallacies, inadequacies of the current thought and how to move against that. That's why Guru engineered this kind of exclusionary, isolated practices of thinking. And there comes Guru with one of the greatest work, because whenever we think about epistemology, we usually think that epistemology, that is science of knowledge, is actually a European construct, a Western thought, starting from René Descartes, and phrased out specifically by Frederick Jameson, as epistemology is a science of knowledge. And Guru had written so many works, that, about 60 works he had written, mostly in Sanskrit, then in Malayalam, and then in Tamil. He has even translated Tirukkural. One such work, which is Arivu, if you translate that, it is simply knowledge, which was written in 1904, Arivu, deals with the epistemological, revolutionary kind of epistemological understanding of Guru. Here Guru comes out with certain arguments, deconstructing even the epistemology of the Western epistemology. Sorry. Western epistemology, where he says that knowledge is not a possession of particular group of people. Knowledge is an encompassing field within which all beings participate. That's why he said first about the rainforest. The verses emphasize that the known has no habitation distinct from knowledge, and that distinction between knower and known arises only as a secondary analytical abstraction. Now comes the most important argument in the work, that is Arivu. The philosophical insight of Guru reaches a point of maturity where he says that if knowledge is universal and indivisible, then the hierarchical monopolization of knowledge by upper castes become logically untenable. This was a fantastic articulation of ideas of Sree Narayana Guru in Arivu, one of the most profoundly scholastic engagement with science of knowledge. He says that if knowledge is universal and indivisible, then the hierarchical monopolization of knowledge by upper caste becomes logically untenable. So Guru's understanding or insistence that knowledge is not confined to anybody or a ritual condition undermine the ideological foundations of notions such as purity, pollution, and untouchability. So he was actually striking this very hard at the face of the Brahminical hierarchy, which was actually enjoying the monopolization of knowledge. Guru's epistemology again asserted that consciousness itself constituted the ground of equality. So towards that consciousness, the people should grow. People should have the intellectual maturity to reach that particular consciousness that our knowledge is also knowledge and that it cannot be marginalized. And if our knowledge cannot be marginalized, then our bodies are not to be marginalized. From mental to physical. This was something like a transposition of Guru's knowledge, epistemological knowledge. Guru did not merely advocate social reform in that sense. He attacked, that's the most important point in Arivu, he attacked the cognitive foundations and assumptions that made caste hierarchy appear natural and inevitable. So he came to the conclusion that caste hierarchy is not natural, it is not the final thing, it is not inevitable, so it has to be challenged. and it has to be responded with knowledge perspective, which are equally eligible to stand up and speak the truth. So these epistemological foundations of social exclusionary practices were challenged and critical with the new thought system of Sree Narayana Guru. If you look at, counterparts in Western thought, you will be able to understand what is this particular thinking emanating from one of the most outstanding scientific thinker of the 17th century, René Descartes. He talks about a methodical doubt. If you want to doubt something, it should be methodical. It should not be prejudiced. It should not be personalized. It should not belong to a particular community, but methodical. If you can doubt even a car like that, if a system like a car or a simple gadget you can methodically doubt, then what about the caste system? It has to be doubted methodically to dismantle inherited beliefs in order to establish certainty on rational foundations. So he was actually rationalizing it, like Descartes, Francis Bacon, and great philosophers did. So Descartes, in reality, proposed that knowledge must begin by suspending all received assumptions and subjecting them to rigorous scrutiny. Guru's philosophical reflections perform a similar function within the context of the caste society. See, there is a lot of heated debates among many scholars that what was in Kerala in the 20th century, in the beginning of the 20th century, which we call the process as Renaissance, Kerala Renaissance. Guru was the father of Renaissance, and many thinkers as Renaissance thinkers. Some of the scholars say that it is not Renaissance per se, because Enlightenment. It is not Enlightenment of the European that actually became instrumental in bringing changes in India, because Enlightenment had the seeds of a colonial or modern prejudice, Western prejudice towards the East. Enlightenment cannot be taken up easily like that. Enlightenment was engaging in a process of otherization. Enlightenment, was engaging in a racial superiority kind of thing, the white man's burden to start with. So Enlightenment, succeeded in disciplining people belonging to other regions other than the Europeans. So what is that particular word to substitute for enlightenment? In Tamil, there is a word, some of the scholars have come up with this word, which is called light of knowledge, which is called Arivoli, A-R-I-V-O-L-I, Arivoli. Something which is coming from Arivu, that is knowledge. If the knowledge of the European is supposed to contain certain prejudiced notions of the white man, then that should be combated, that should be confronted with the knowledge of the perspective of the Orient. So Guru's philosophical practice can therefore be interpreted as a form of indigenous methodological doubt, directed not against theology alone, but against the social structures that governed knowledge production. So knowledge production is very important. Unless and until you confront this particular production mechanism, then that knowledge and the knowledge systems will prevail and continue to subordinate these people. And they will live in these oppressive regimes which bank on the notion of the culture of fear. So the philosophical claim in Arivu, that what remains as knowledge of knowledge transforms knowledge into a principle of self-realization. Knowledge becomes not merely an intellectual achievement, but an emancipatory recognition of human dignity. Guru's work thus embodies a form of enlightenment within a caste-bound society. That is a difference there. Europe, it was not the caste-bound society. There were superstitions, there were orthodox belief systems, but it cannot be compared with the caste in Kerala. It is entirely different. So enlightenment process was an easy business for them. Science easily succeeded there, but here it is not like that. Because it is rigidly written in the mental framework of the people themselves. They consider themselves as untouchables. They consider themselves as people who belonging to an inferior race. How to save them? Only through creating an alternative knowledge system that will fight the forms of oppressive knowledge system that are in circulation. Guru's work thus embodies a form of enlightenment within a caste-based society, where the courage to think, as Kant said, Immanuel Kant said, you should have the courage to think independently required resistance to deeply internalized social norms. So it was actually a protest against the internalized, deeply internalized, ingrained, embedded social norms. It was not like an academic who studied just for the sake of knowledge, for the creation of new knowledge. It is not like that. Guru was engaging in the production of emancipatory knowledge, socially emancipatory knowledge. So Guru's epistemology should be considered as a high order epistemology, which endorses the modernity also. He cannot be taken away from the modernity, because modernity was already there. Missionary activities were there, industries were there, English education was there, English medicine was there, a totally new cultural system was there, and Guru endorsed that also. If you look at, one of the verses, from Deva Dashakam, you will be able to see this is a very popular prayer written by Sree Narayana Guru. Deivame kathukol kangı kaividadingu ñangalai. Navigan nee pavabdikkoravi van thoni nin padam. So this is not to be taken as a very simple prayer, but there is an epistemological understanding that there is a steam engine, there is a steamboat, a symbol of modernity, actually a technology which accelerated a moment in history. Steam engine is a technology that accelerated certain moments in history. Guru endorsed that. Otherwise, he would have written, a boat, something like that, a thoni like that. But it should not be there as Avi Van Thoni. One thoni. It's a big ship. So Guru's sensibility in this sense is semiotically represented in his poems, in his writings very well. This is an expression which is coming from Arivu. What kind of knowledge that Guru was visualizing, imaging in his mind for the people of Kerala, for the untouchables of Kerala, for the downtrodden people of Kerala is that, you have to definitely understand what is modernity. You have to use technology. You have to go to industries. You have to go to education, English education, and understand that, your bodies are subjected to this tyrannical social order of fear. Metaphorically, if you look at that, Guru was fighting a kind of ritualization of fear. In Kerala, upper caste emotional communities cultivated through ritual texts, Brahminical orthodoxy and spatial codes valorized purity and superiority, while untouchable communities were socialized into fear as a means of survival. And see, this fear was not merely private or psychological. It was public, ritualized, and deeply encoded in social relations. It was not a private emotion, but it was publicly made. It became public. That's why they were not able to move through roads which were forbidden for them. They cannot eat the kind of food the superior caste people eat. They cannot dress. They cannot have decency, at least dress to protect their dignity, the dignity of the body, nothing like that. Even their smell was scared. Even there was an olfactory kind of marginalization in the 19th century. Even order was not permitted to encroach upon a particular region. So the whole body and emotions together was, blocked by the ritualized processing of making of fear through rituals, through procedures, through contact, and through norms of social behavior. So Guru, in that sense, was coming up with modernity, modernity, equality, rationality, and dignity. The thoughts of individual and social reform were clearly manifested in his life and work. Modernity in simple terms means the courage to question inherited customs and rebuild a society on reason and justice, provided that you have individual freedom. Guru did exactly this. He did not reject tradition blindly. So many people ask this question, he installed or consecrated deities, then he was again going on the religious line. Yes, he was going on that line because he was of the conviction, he had a conviction that, the people of Kerala Majority of the people of Kerala, including the marginalized people, were not matured enough to get away from the religion, the kind of rituals they were practicing. So only through imitating that, he will be able to make the counter narrative. And he said, I had consecrated a god, Nammuda Shiva, Nammuda Devam, like that. So without that, he cannot win over the people, the confidence of the people, commonsensically ordered people, they cannot think more beyond that. At that point, Guru did that. That was in 1888. He did not reject tradition blindly, but he examined it carefully, accepted what was humane, and discarded what was oppressive. Any kind of oppressive act will be rejected by Guru. In this sense, he was not anti-tradition. He was a reformer who brought tradition into dialogue with modern values. The tradition needs to be brought into dialogue with the modern values. It has to meet the power of modernity. Then Guru definitely thought that, ultimately the traditions will have the death. It will die out in the face of the modernity, the power of modernity. As I said, the accelerated power of modernity, that particular historical moment. In Guru, some other sense, you can see that the past, the present, and the future met creatively in Guru. He was actually a point of convergence where all these past, present, and the future met. He inherited the philosophical depth of Vedanta. It was not the Advaita of Shankara, totally entirely different to the Advaita of Shankara. Lived in the social realities of 19th century Kerala and imagined a new social order for the future. One may say that he developed a new human constitution. That's why he was looking at the body of the human, not as a caste body, but as a human body. That's why he said that, the dogs will understand another dog. A dog will understand another dog as belonging to his own species. But the humans will not understand that. Humans will be affiliated and accredited with religions and castes. There is a common event that is usually narrated by people that, once the Guru was asked about his name, he said, Nanu. Then the person asked, what is your caste? After seeing you, if you cannot understand me, then how can you understand me, hearing me? That was the question. എന്നെ കണ്ടിട്ട് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് മനസ്സിലായില്ലെങ്കിൽ ഞാൻ പറയുന്നത് ആരാണെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് നിങ്ങൾ എങ്ങനെ എന്നെ മനസ്സിലാക്കുമെന്നാണ് ഗുരു ചോദിച്ചത്. He was asking the same questions to so many people. There are so many humorous comments about Guru, which are not, joke in that sense, but social satire in that sense. തലശ്ശേരിയിൽ ഗുരുവിൻ്റെ തന്നെ ശിഷ്യന്മാർ പണികഴിപ്പിച്ച ഒരു ക്ഷേത്രം അവിടെ അദ്ദേഹം വിസിറ്റ് ചെയ്ത സമയത്ത്, even in his own people's temple, people belonging to the lower caste were not admitted. Then he said, why they are not being admitted? No, it will take some time to admit them. We have to think about that. We have certain procedures to think about that. How long it will take to admit them? And they said, ഒരു വർഷം കഴിയട്ടെ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. Immediately there was a downpour, heavy rain. And then Guru immediately asked them, now admit them, the Varsham is over. Varsham in Malayalam also means rain. So you admit them. So this was the social satirical kind of, sharpened knowledge with him, the perspective with him. It is not joke or humor. He was actually not joking at them, but it was a thesis before them. Why don't you admit them? Because they are human beings, you should admit them as human beings. If you look at them as humans along with you, that's what I taught you. That was his motto. And look at many of the disciples of Guru were also mentored in that direction. Some people, countered Guru, in some sense debated with Guru. He accommodated that. So that was again another important aspect of Guru. Because, he had so many disciples, out of which, the radical disciple was Sahodara Ayyappan. Guru said, ഒരു ജാതി ഒരു മതം ഒരു ദൈവം. Ayyappan said, ജാതി വേണ്ട, മതമില്ല, ദൈവമില്ല. ധർമ്മം, ധർമ്മം, ധർമ്മം. So that was actually much against the teachings of Guru, many people thought, and many people went to Guru and said that, Ayyappan is saying like this, he's saying that there is no God, no religion, and no caste. What is this? Guru said, what he said is right. The same thing he also said. Oru jati, oru madam, oru deivam manushana means it is the human alone. How can I consider, humans as different? So if I underline that particular notion, then Ayyappan is also right. That's why Devadashakam, Guru wrote Devadashakam and Ayyappan thought Science Dashakam, Perhaps some of you might have seen Science Dashakam, in which Ayyappan, makes, a classic statement, which we may find, sometimes we may find that, he's making an opposing idea with Sree Narayana Guru. He said, Kodi Suryan Udichalum, ഒഴിയാത്തൊരു കൂരിരുൾ തുരന്നു സത്യം കാണിക്കും സയൻസിന് തൊഴുന്നു ഞാൻ. കോടി സൂര്യൻ ഉദിച്ചാലും ഒഴിയാത്തൊരു കൂരിരുൾ തുരന്നു സത്യം കാണിക്കും സയൻസിന് തൊഴുന്നു ഞാൻ. That is, science is God to Ayyappan. And then all these things were brought before Guru. He said that is also right. The same thing he said, because the human species is the caste. There is no other caste, no religion, only the human species. Organically, everyone is coming from the womb of the woman, so there is no change. So that is what Ayyappan also reiterated in a very different format. The format was different. Guru was strategically, very diplomatically saying, maybe in that sense, without offending anybody, the truth. But Ayyappan offended the truth, offended the opponents with the truth, a blind truth. That was the only difference. The point of distance from Guru to Ayyappan was nil in some sense. That is why Guru said, after reading Deva Dashakam, you should also read Ayyappan's Science Dashakam. So in that sense, a dialogue was made possible by Guru in those times. Not like the university professors these days, very infallible, arguments, posited by university professors that the students cannot speak against the professor. It was not like that. Guru was endorsing views. He was updating knowledge. He was revising his own notions. Every day he was growing into a great human constitution. Thereby, he gave a metaphysical foundation to social democracy. The value of democracy was knowledgeable to Guru, and his humanism was both ethical and spiritual. His only mission was to dismantle this mental structure through the values of modernity, reason, education, debate, and inclusion. A concept that we often celebrate these days, social inclusion. Guru was of the idea in those times itself, you have to include all these people. Let us take everyone's arguments into us, debate with them, discuss with them, and create a knowledge which is acceptable to all. A knowledge that is democratically conceived. That's why Guru gave a metaphysical foundation to social democracy, as argued by many theoreticians. And his enlightenment was very different. It was not the enlightenment of the European. The Europeans' enlightenment sometimes landed and finally culminated in conquest, in dictatorship, in colonialism, in capitalism exploiting people. But Guru's enlightenment was the enlightenment of compassion, karuna. Finally, he reached this point, after all this, inculcating all these values of modernity and all, Guru reached to this particular point that his was an enlightenment of compassion. And that's why he became ultimately a public intellectual. And he mentored other public intellectuals also. And this cultural dialogue happened something like, to make some of the ideas very popular and forceful. Like Karl Marx said, ideas became a material force when they reached the masses. So Guru's ideas became a material force because it reached the masses. Same theoretical formulation was again made by Karl Marx about the eyes of humans. If you look at your eyes, as simply as eyes, kannugal, there is nothing beyond that. But at what point of time your eye is becoming a human eye? When you understand others, when you incorporate others' ideas, when you see their pain, your eye is becoming a human eye. So Guru's eyes were also in that sense, it was a human eye. It was not simply an object, a mechanism to see others, but to understand others, realize the problems in Kerala of the 19th century, and to posit arguments against that, to create a band of people who would definitely struggle against all the oppressive forms of social exclusion, untouchability, unseeability, unapproachability, and even unshadowability. And Guru's eye in that sense was a human eye, of a great human eye. He society not through caste, prejudice, but through the possibility of emancipation. In his gaze, there was a social capital, trust, dignity, and hope. He taught people to see themselves as agents of change. In today's perilous times of division and intolerance, Kerala may need to recover this vision, to look at society again through Guru's eyes. That's why the great writing, just after the consecration of the deity in 1888, Jadipedam Madadvesham, Edumillada Sarvarum, Sodarattvena Vaiduna, Madriga Sthanamadu. If you put it, translate it into English, this is a model place where all live in brotherhood, fraternity, an idea that was, that became very celebrated idea since the French Revolution, without caste discrimination or hatred. Again, he went further in another poem, one womb, one form, there is no difference in it. Oru yoni, oragaram, oru bhedavum illadil. All belong to the humans. So human species is a caste. Every human is a caste. If every human is a caste, then the signs of that caste is humanism, love for your neighbor, like Jesus Christ said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And very interestingly, once a Christian asked Guru that, you come to Christian, you should definitely read the Bible and you should understand Christianity. Then Guru immediately replied, I understood Christianity even before you understood Christianity. I am a Christian before you became a Christian. So Guru's mental disposition was for the creation of a new species. Species was already there, but people forgot that species, that is the human. That's why he said that Guru's idea was the creation of a new constitution for the human in India, human in Kerala in the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century. At the same time, the installation, the consecration which he made in 1888 can be considered as the installation of the modern Kerala state, as we call the Kerala model of development or Kerala model of culture or progress, whatever we like that. You can trace the path to that particular episode in 1888. Thank you. This is just, to see you something about the unthinking society, the allegory of the cave, like Plato described in the Republic. People are sitting there, chained. They cannot move left or right or backward. They only see the pictures on the cave. So it was a condition of the 19th century Kerala. People were living as if they were living in a cave. They were not seeing the light of the day. Arivoli, that was the ambitious project of Guru in showing them the light of the day. So about Arivu, a fantastic work of Guru, which is not often, studied or discussed by scholars in Kerala. The verses emphasize that known has no habitation distinct from knowledge. Finally, if knowledge is universal and indivisible, then the hierarchical monopolization of knowledge by upper castes become logically untenable. This is the thesis of Guru. Based on this thesis that he fought casteism and all forms of oppression. Jadipedam Madadvesham Edumillada Sarvarum Sodarattvena Vaiduna Madriga Sthanamadu. Towards that particular model state that Guru was visualizing his dream through his intellectual pursuits, not just through performances. So actually what Guru was installed in but he had installed in 1888 was actually the installation of modern Kerala. So after preparing this particular lecture, I asked a number of questions to myself, because actually the impact of Guru's teachings, I reflect, I understand, experience the impact of Guru's teachings in my own life immediately. It's just a matter of over 3 or 4 years that I started reading Guru. I'm not a pandit in that sense, rigorously reading all these books, but once you get access to Guru's knowledge or knowledge system, or the pool of knowledge, the ocean of knowledge, you'll be able to understand the kind of thinking that was in his mind. Like I said about the verses in Deva Dashakam, Navigan ni Pavabdi Guravi Van Toni Nimpadam, So all these things, give us, much understanding about modernity, because steam navigation visible in the waterways of Kerala by the late 19th century embodied speed, mechanization, and transformative force of modern science. That's why he integrated this image, that means that particular word, into the spiritual metaphor. That is, Guru effectively, relocated devotion within the experiential horizon of technological modernity. This is called acceleration historical time. At that particular point of time, to accelerate thinking of the masses, to accelerate thinking of the masses, these kind of, semantic shifts in usage of words was necessary. That Guru did. So that is why when we look at Guru, from the point of view of modernity, we have a lot of things to learn from Sree Narayana Guru. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand and I will bring you the mic. Please remember to keep your questions brief so that everyone has a chance to ask.
So, 100 years after the life and times of Narayana Guru, I think he has completely failed in bringing out any change in our society. The fundamental reason for that was that he fought for the upliftment of the downtrodden society, not elimination of the caste itself. On the other hand, he also established the system of caste deviation when he said, this is our Shiva. That is the wrong thing to do. He should have eliminated the whole concept of caste.
Yeah.
So Max Muller said, caste is never going to die in India. It will definitely, it will have its order. So Guru, why, during the lecture, I think I made it a point to say that this consecration in 1888, as you said, is very easily interpreted, There are various theories regarding that, what word Guru used, whether it is, Nammoda Shiva or Nammoda Shivan, whatever be like that. Because, sir, the thing is that, at that point of time, the mental apparatus within which people think, which can be called as the paradigm of thought processes, was not mentally, socially matured enough to look at, a very different kind of argument from Guru, saying that we don't need any religion, we don't need any caste, nothing like that. We have no belief in rituals. Rituals are not wanted. You can have a free life like that. He cannot make it a point like that, because, the intellectual capacity, the maturity of the people in those times was not like as we think today. We are thinking about 19th century from the lens of the 21st century. We are highly educated people. We know the problems connected with the caste. We scientifically understand these things. But the majority of the people, including the people in the lower strata of the society, they were not having that particular idea articulation to think that this is against their right, all these oppressions. So Guru wanted to prove that using tradition itself, he rejected the idea that it is to be consecrated by the Brahmin. Anybody can consecrate that. Then it was a stone from the fathom, from the deeper waters of the Nayar river. It signified nothing, just a material, nothing more than that. You can attribute anything to that. So I am lifting that. I have the power to lift that to divinity. So in that sense, we can't say that, Guru was intentionally doing wrong there. He was using religion for the purpose of religion. He was using tradition as a plot to prove that what existed in the tradition itself was wrong. Concerning the social hierarchy, like that. So that is my response to your question. So many people ask the same question, why he was not able to dismiss caste like that. Structurally, caste, he was actually, as I said, he was actually locating the problems connected to the caste and the articulation of the idea of the fear among the people. They cannot do that. So I have the capacity, I have the courage to do this because I have the courage to think, as Kant said. I thought and then I did that. So Guru did that just to project before the people, ordinary people, that it is his natural right to do that, not an exclusive right of the Brahmin or the Nambudiri. That's my response to your question.
When we read Guru and Ayyappan, we can see a lot of glimpses of Buddhism in their preachings, and a lot of things are there. Particularly when Ayyappan has actually practiced a lot of things while he was working with the community. It's not like reformation thing, even otherwise community enhancement things he has done, like the SND Southern formation, and then a lot of institutions they started. So how you see that transformation, how they had taken from, Guru has taken from the Buddhism, and then later I can see that some of the Kabir Das verses, I mean, if the Devadasham has a lot of the similar kind of it.
Sure.
You feel that, is this the same thing is coming in Malayalam, that kind of thing. Is how do you see this, adaptations? Is it like a conscious adaptation, or it's unconsciously coming because they're all talking for the same thing, in different era? But the thing is that if you're looking into the humanity, compassion, and then progress, then is it the automatic or organic adaptations, or like the conscious things coming from the?
That's also a very important question. Thank you for that question. But the thing is that, these are not really, I respectfully differ with you with the term adaptation like that. It is not a question of adaptation, but it was something like, internalization of knowledge system belong to other sects or other beliefs, other belief systems. Guru was open to all these religions. Guru was open to all philosophies, both the Vedic philosophies, the Jain, Buddhist, the Christian. He was open to all such philosophies. He never considered any of such philosophies or scriptures or, what you call sacred sayings as something absolute or infallible. He never believed in the infallibility of any of these sects. He was above that. That is the point of my lecture here. And thank you for asking that question, because, my point of lecture here is that, he got himself elevated to a particular status, of a great original thinker. That's why he is often referred to as father of Kerala Renaissance. There were other people also who can be considered as originators or, thinkers in that sense, but never equal to Guru, because, he actually, as you said, incorporated the ideas. He read about them, he contemplated on that, and then ultimately it is coming to the science of human, the constitution of the human species. So be it Buddhism or be it Kabir Das or, the impact of any other religion, Guru was not taking it as, a tool to, to make a differentiation in that sense, but to accommodate those things in his belief system, but to counter all the oppressive forms of knowledge. Whatever knowledge taken or, internalized by Guru was becoming a knowledge pool, a knowledge perspective to combat, to challenge the dominant social order of exploitation and tyranny. That was the ultimate aim of Guru. So I think we need to think about Guru like that. From a thought perspective, Guru was very different. It was not a question of adaptation or accommodation, but it was a question of, internally accepting the values elsewhere. At the same time, projecting all those value systems into a combined effort, like a thesis to project the human science, the science of humanity. That's my response,
No. When we talk about, mention about the knowledge, how, to use that knowledge for the social change and all, from 1920s to we are now in 2020. And rather we progress, particularly, and then whatever his writings, it's mainly in Malayalam. It's not in a different language like the Sanskrit Veda and all other things in Sanskrit, and the common people didn't have any access to that. But here it is like a common man's language he used. But still, the imparting or like making mass to understand that is still not taking place. And besides those people who is actually coming in the same the guru's tradition or disciplines, they turn to be like a more of ritualistic and unscientific in their way. So how this the twist has happened? Because this is completely a opposite direction move. It is not like the direction that the guru was thinking, and like maybe over the period, many people thought, and guru maybe as you said internalized, and then like brought a larger human based kind of thing as brought in. So compared to that, where we are right now, that distinct has happened. So how do you think, and what is in your opinion that distinct, like maybe the twist, the point happened in this knowledge system?
Yeah. Instead of looking at a progressive kind of understanding of history, I think sometimes we need to look at history from a regressive kind of standpoint. Regressive means you have to go back to the 19th century, 1920s, when Guru lived, and how he evolved such a thought process for the people living in and around. Because he was an Idava, he was talking this for all the castes, everyone. There was no exclusion in that sense. So look at the maturity, social maturity of Guru of the beginning. That means he died in 1928, the first 2 decades of the 20th century. He was far ahead of the 21st century people. So the intellectual maturity of a set of people, a group of people in 2026 cannot be compared in any way with the intellectual maturity of the person who lived in the 1920s, in the beginning of the 20th century, because history of this kind of a linear kind of notion of progress, things like that, is sometimes very misleading. But I know your point of argument, I know very well. Sometimes the linear kind of the progresses and all the development which we make is totally a misnomer, in the sense that we are far behind them. At a certain point of time in history, certain events, certain people trigger certain events, accelerate, as I said, historical moments. Such an acceleration happens within a context. In 21st century, you are happily living. You are not affected by any kind of, there are exclusions. Even now, there are exclusionary practices, denial of rights, everything is happening, even in Kerala. But the thing is that we are happy with that, because we have all other kinds of freedom. We are enjoying a public life. We are enjoying our own private spaces. We can gather, we can discuss, we can debate, anything like that, But the thing is that we are not doing that. Because the publicality of engaging with an issue is not there very strong now. In those times, totally restricted private spaces became centers of this publicality for Guru. Temple became a public space. Schools became a public space. Markets became public space. Streets became public space. Ashram became a public space. And think about the intellectual maturity, the social maturity of Guru in considering his only European disciple, Ernest Kirk. He was from Manchester, from a very high aristocratic family. When Ernest Kirk became a disciple of Guru, he said that Ernest Kirk was ready to put on all the sannyasis, attire, but Guru said, no, bring a pair of suit and a tie for him. He should be a European, a sannyasi European in Varkala, in Shivagiri. So that was the maturity. Just think about the maturity, the social maturity of the people in these times, despite the fact that we have all these advancements in technology, culture, and all kinds of, cultural globalization, and how perverted are we in our belief systems, So I would like to measure the progress, not the progress of history, but a regressive methodology, going backward to understand where do we stand. Locating myself in the 21st century, 2026, rather than saying that, I am far advanced or progressive human being. But, despite the fact that we have a constitution, we have all these reforms, we are lagging behind all these things. Historically, the issue of these kinds of reforms and mental engagements, thought processes appear as a triggering point at a certain point of time. That triggered in the 1900 to 1928, 28 years, or even more than that, up to the death of Guru. So I wish to make a regressive understanding of history in that sense, not a progressive understanding of history. As a lesson, I emulate. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your talk, Professor. You started with the rainforest metaphor. So I was just thinking, along with the potential for emancipation that science has, there is also the potential for violence that science has, right? So I was wondering whether he addressed that possibility as well in some form. The possibility of science also being a place of violence. Science and technology specifically, perhaps. So I was wondering whether you have any insight of how he thought about the potential for violence that science also has within itself, as we now know.
You're right. You're 100% right. That's a usual, very widely prevalent, assumption about science that, science can become dangerous. Science can engage in dehumanizing practices, things like where Guru stood for humanization. His constitution was humanized constitution in that sense. Of course, but there is a difference in that. Science and scientific thinking, social scientific thinking of Guru. I am not using this as a caveat to argue my case, but the title of my thesis, my talk was scientific imagination of the social. He was engaging in a scientific imagination of the social, not looking at the technologies as the panacea, not looking at technologies as the final answer, because he was very well aware of the things that technologies will sometimes fail you. But he, at that particular point of time, he had to promote technology, because technology will empower materially. Because no ideas, see, you can talk about ideas, you can talk about structural forms of ideational fertilization, things like that, but at the same time, basically the people want something material. Empowerment can happen only through the material advancement. So Guru very well understood that, and he galvanized his efforts to make people more productive, creative, both in the industrial sector as well as in the agricultural sector, to earn a living, to stand on their own and to become strong enough to challenge the economic exploitation. Because Guru very well understood that all these social kinds of marginalization and exclusionary practices was based on economic. Why I said, I think if you had followed my presentation, fear was articulated in the minds, internalized in the minds of the marginalized people to make them fit for the economy. They have to work. They have to do all the slavish work for the society, that is the hierarchical society. So with that intent in mind, Guru propagated technology and science. But thinking-wise, it is entirely different. He was a critical thinker for the society. He used the scientific method only. He used, the field of the 19th century, the 20th century, beginning of the 20th century, as a field, as something like a laboratory to experiment with his ideas. There, he is more with the theoretical scientist, not with the practical scientist or the technologist. Thank you. This is not an answer, but a response to your question. Because I know I can't answer you, but this is a response. Yeah. Totally different souls in that sense, Totally different. Yeah. You are right. Yeah. Because Guru was having a vision for, a long distance vision for the poor people. That's why he responded to Gandhi. Once Gandhi asked, at what point of time all these people will get all the benefits, the well-being. He said, Gandhi, you are to born again. രണ്ടാമത് ഗാന്ധി ഒന്നുകൂടെ ജനിക്കണം എന്നാണ് പറഞ്ഞത്. So it's very difficult in that sense. ഗാന്ധി രണ്ടാമത് ജനിക്കത്തില്ലെന്നുള്ള ഗുരുവിന് അറിയാമല്ലോ. Because he was a scientific thinker. So that he was of the belief that all this exploitation will continue like that. It's very difficult, in that sense. Sir.
Yeah, I've just more an observation that, you laid out his whole life from the beginning to the end, and, whatever he was trying to convey was in great, they must have found great opposition at that time. So I'm very interested to know what kind of opposition happened during his, the period in which was a long period of time in which he was able to propagate his thoughts. Because, the only parallel which I can think of is Christ. But he had only 3 years to propagate his thoughts before he was killed.
Yes.
And he was a Jew. And if he was a Jew and he was speaking against the practices of the Jew, but within 3 years, he was silenced, if you want to say it the other way. But he was able to navigate this opposition. What was the kind of opposition which, how did it manifest itself? And how did he manage to, stay clear and have a natural depth? Because, that should have, many of his thoughts should have invited a lot of, in fact, even death. But it didn't actually had a natural death, I think. So, yeah, that's just my
Yeah. That's indeed a very interesting question, sir. So he was a great pragmatist, in that sense, You cannot look at Guru as simply as a philosopher or a thinker of very high order. At the same time, he was a very strategic practitioner of ideas. See, people were not able to oppose him for his postulations of knowledge and perspectives. So there were opposition from his own caste, his own community. And most of the people to whom he spoke, they were not agreeable. They were reluctant to support him, to be with him. But we have historically not such instances, many instances of opposition against Guru. But like all philosophers, like all reformers, he also faced this ridiculing, and also all kinds of what you call accusations against speaking against the order that he suffered. But you see, your question carries a very important weight in that sense, because Guru was actually, in that sense, he was distancing all these opposition with his knowledge. His knowledge perspective was very well grounded. So no opposition can work against Guru's ideas. He stood very firm in that, from within and from without, from all aspects, And Guru, sometimes, Guru was so disillusioned with the people in Kerala, that he made so many visits to Tamil Nadu, Chennai and Madurai. Once in Madurai, he told his disciples, interestingly, that, the people of Tamil Nadu, they're very loving. Let us put up the ashram and live here, Maybe, some other displeasure of living in Kerala in those times. The people of Tamil Nadu, Tamilians are very loving. So what about living here? Let us set up an ashram here and live. See, in Sri Lanka also, he was very loved and likened by the people of Sri Lanka. He had so many visits to Sri Lanka and Tamil Nadu. He did not visit any of the North Indian states, only South India. Constant visitor to Mangalore. So he had that occasion of, mingling with people, that association with a large area. Because in South India in those times was, much bigger and much, it was more, you cannot just imagine about the South India as if now you imagine about the South India. So his conceptualization of the globe, conceptualization of the space was very bigger in that sense. He was not looking at the petty things against him, accusations against him in Travancore, He was looking at it from the point of view of something like a global citizen in that sense. So he was not concerned about these things. So the globality of thinking, plus the scientific reasoning behind that globality of thinking made him immune to such kind of criticisms and accusations. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Any more questions?
I am Bhaskaran, a retired teacher.
Bhaskaran.
Yes.
Yeah. When I hear your name, one of the most outstanding biographies of Sree Narayana Guru was written by Bhaskaran, T. Bhaskaran.
T. Bhaskaran. I know. I had gone through his book.
Yeah.
Book also.
Apart from M.K. Sanu.
Here, my question is entirely different from others. Guru was a visionary, and he was the greatest man that Kerala produced during the last millennium. I agreed, but he is a failed man because he has visions. He wanted to change the entire society, but failed it. He started SNDP Yogam. SNDP Yogam, D stands for Dharma. He wanted to preach a religion. And for that, he wanted to make an organization for the spread of that his thoughts. But he failed within 25 years. And he denounced it. It is that is why I tell that I say he was a failed man. We have to say he was a reformer, Renaissance. Okay, agreed. But his life was a failed one's life. Then you can give and you can interpret it. It is my view.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, because this is your age and experience. That's a great thing. I value that, honor that. But I have a very different opposite take. Yeah, I respect you, sir, but I have a very entirely different take on your comment. Sree Narayana Guru is never a failed man. Who failed then is the question.
I think that is your answer.
You anticipated my answer.
Agreed.
Yeah, not we failed, but Kerala failed. People of Kerala failed, the culture of Kerala failed, state of Kerala failed. Because this is a very important question that you asked, if you look at the kind of thing that are happening with the yogam and all kinds of fanfares and, all kinds of celebrations in the name of Guru. What is happening is not the failure of Guru, but the failure of Kerala state, the Kerala people of Kerala. The consciousness of Kerala failed in grasping the consciousness of Guru. If I exceed that, even concurrently talking to Rashmi also, 21st century failed before the 20th century. Heidegger talked about the 20th century as the century of unthinking. But the grave problem that we face today is the unthinking. We are not thinking on line with Sree Narayana Guru. We are not thinking beyond him. Ayyappan, thought beyond him. He agreed with that. Now there's a great question of intolerance to thinking, intolerance to new ideas. In those times, luckily, the presence of the British, the presence of the English was a great saving clause for Sree Narayana Guru. That's why Guru once said, not humor, but seriously, very seriously said that I became a sannyasi because the British are ruling India. The impact of Western education, Western science. That's why I told, I talked about Ernest Kirk, the only European who became the disciple of Guru. He was in the entire of the European attire, the shoe and the ties and all. So how do you accommodate differences, differences, how do you accommodate perspectival differences is a very important thing. Guru accommodated perspectival differences, but opposed them. The exploitative character of the social order was vehemently opposed by Guru, using tradition itself. So he was a great strategist in those times. Not only a thinker, a great practitioner of ideas. But presently we fail. We fail everywhere we fail, We have a constitution. Just to think about the constitution and think about the kind of things that are happening in India now. Recently, you know about the stories that are, fabricated and coming upon Kerala, Kerala story 1, Kerala story 2, how many Kerala stories will come like that, But even then, people of Kerala are not thinking. They are not, only a microscopic minority of the people of Kerala are thinking, Others are, they're led to believe that, some gurus will come one day and save us like that. And no people in Kerala in the 19th century and the 20th century visualized a guru. But the guru emerged from nothing like that. So guru was a possibility in the 19th and 20th century. Why guru is not a possibility in the 21st century is a question that we need to ask. Instead of, putting up an argument that guru failed, but we failed. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I think if that's all, is there one more question? No. Okay. We can bring this session to a close. Before I thank Dr. Sebastian Joseph, I would really like to thank you all for joining us today and making the Q&A and the discussion an extremely rich discussion. Isn't it so that we have this kind of sparring and debating at this high level has not happened before. And I think we would credit you for this enlightening lecture. Sebastian sir has been talking about doing this lecture from the start of this series of general talks this year, and has only now I understood really what has been turning in his mind until he has brought it here to us today. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you for all the mentorship, the guidance, and all of your contributions to journal so far. Small token of our appreciation as usual.
Thank you.
Good reading material.
Thank you.
So Well, it's online and it's on YouTube. You can catch the lecture again. And please leave your comments as well if you share it with someone. We have had many people go back after the talks and ruminate over the lecture and come up with comments later also. So please do that. We'd like to thank the Geojit Foundation for supporting the Journal Lecture Series. In March, we will close this season and begin with a new season in the new year. And we are coming to the end of season 3. So do share the lecture with as many people as you can. And let's have some good discussion around this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your patient hearing, because actually the theme is entirely, a very different kind, because social theory is too difficult for even for university students to engage with. But more than the university students, when I deliver public lectures like this, people engage with them. Thank you very much for your positive participation as well as for very critically engaging questions. Thank you.